Have you ever felt that the more you love, the more you lose yourself? As if the other person were the only anchor for your inner chaos? As if without them you cease to exist? Maybe you've never truly loved. Maybe what you call love is just a desperate attempt to numb a void you've never learned to face. Because where there is emptiness, there will be attachment. Never love. Rumi will leave, but almost no one understood. The world taught you to chase love as if it were salvation, to believe that finding someone would be the end of pain, that surrendering yourself would be complete. But there is a brutal difference between giving yourself completely and throwing yourself into someone's arms to escape from yourself. Attachment is in a hurry. Love is present. Attachment demands. Love embraces. Attachment screams, "Stay with me." Love whispers, "I am already here." And yet, you cling, because you're tired, because you're hurt, because you're trying to be strong, but inside, you're silently falling apart. No one taught you to love. They taught you to cling, to depend, to beg for emotional scraps as if they were banquets. And now you confuse longing with need, desire with absence, love with survival. But real love is not born of lack. Real love only blooms when you no longer need it. Rumi said, "The pain you feel is the messenger. Listen to it." What if what you feel is just a cry for help from your soul? You call it passion, but it's fear. You call it intensity, but it's need. You call it love, but it's the echo of a hole no one has been able to fill, nor will they. Because it's no one's job to heal what you've hidden even from yourself. And maybe that's why it hurts so much when the other person leaves. Not because he was everything, but because, with him, the illusion that you were enough went away. But what if I told you that the problem was never the other person? And if the pain of abandonment is in fact the reflection of a much older abandonment, yours? The day you left your soul alone and began to search outside for what you could only find inside. How many times have you annulled yourself to be chosen? How many times have you confused presence with peace? How many times have you thought you were in love, when in fact you were just running away from your own silence? There is an emptiness in there, a silence that screams, a longing that doesn't even have a name. And as long as you try to silence that emptiness with someone's presence, you will remain trapped in the same cycle. Attachment, pain, absence. Attachment, pain, absence. That's what nobody tells you. But Rumi counted. With poetry, with soul, with silence. He didn't say what you wanted to hear. He said what his soul needed to remember. And maybe that's why you're here now. Maybe something inside you is starting to listen. And perhaps for that very reason you can't simply watch this video as if it were just another one. Because this content is not entertainment. It's a mirror. It's help. It's a seed. And if something inside you trembled until now, if a forgotten part of your soul was awakened by these words, so write in the comments now, "I don't get attached. I choose myself." This phrase is not just a symbol. It is a silent commitment to your own healing. And before you go, stop for a second and breathe. Leave a like if this video has touched any part of your story. This helps the content reach other wounded souls like yours. And if you feel like you need to continue this healing journey, sign up now. Because here, each video is a key, and you're starting to remember where your soul hid the door. Now let's go deeper, because what's hurting inside has a name, it has roots, and it needs to be looked at with courage. Let's talk about the invisible problem que te prende no ciclo do apego, that which no one sees, but which silently commands everything you call love. Maybe what you call love is just fear of being alone, but no one told you that. Because from an early age they taught you that love is needing, wanting someone all the time, missing them with every absence. And so you grew up thinking that the more pain, the more proof of love, the more dependence, the more surrender. But what if I told you that what you experienced wasn't love? It was attachment in disguise? How many times have you found yourself stuck in cycles that repeat themselves? You meet someone, you give yourself too quickly, you start to idealize, to expect too much, to mold yourself, to lose yourself, and suddenly, fear sets in. The fear of being left, the fear of not being enough, the fear that it will all end before it has truly begun. And then, without even realizing it, you start to suffocate the other person with your insecurity, with its need for constant presence, with its urgency for an answer, for validation, for certainty. You call it intensity. You say you love too much. But deep down, he knows he's trying to protect himself from what he fears most: abandonment. And this is the pain that almost no one has the courage to admit. The pain of loving not for the other, but for one's own absence. The pain of seeking in the other, an anesthetic for one's own silence. Have you ever had this feeling? That no matter how many times you start over, you always come back to the same place inside yourself? The same hole, the same feeling of insufficiency, the same emptiness. This is the cycle of attachment. It begins with a glow, with euphoria, with hope. But when reality sets in, everything that was hidden inside you screams, "Don't leave me. Stay with me. Prove to me that I'm worth it." But no one outside of you can do that. No external love can cure the lack you feel for yourself. And that's where the suffering begins. Not because the other is cruel, but because, without knowing it, you gave someone else the responsibility of keeping you whole. Do you realize the weight of this? You are not looking for love. You are seeking salvation. And every time someone doesn't live up to your expectations, you feel rejected, hurt, forgotten. But was it the other person who forgot you? Or were you the one who abandoned your own soul, trying to be what was expected of you? Rumi said, "Do not look outside, for what can only be cured inside." And this is one of the most ignored phrases by the anxious mind, because it hurts. It hurts to look inside and realize that the absence that hurts the most is not someone else's, but yours. It hurts to admit that what you feel is not a lack of love. It is a lack of yourself. It's disconnection. It's an emptiness that has been pushed to the bottom for so long that now appears in the form of anxiety, neediness, jealousy, and a constant fear of loss. You relate to people, but in reality, you are relating to your own wound. You react to what you feel, not what the other person does. You keep trying to protect yourself from pain that was created long before that relationship began. Maybe back then you felt invisible. Maybe he wasn't loved the way he needed to be. Perhaps he learned that he needed to please in order not to be rejected, and this pattern became his way of loving. But that's not love. This is emotional survival. It's camouflaged attachment. And as long as you keep thinking that someone will heal what hurt you back then, you'll keep going back to the same place. Same face, different name. Same story, known ending. The void will continue to disguise itself as desire. Fear will continue to wear the mask of passion. And suffering will continue to be called love, until you stop, until you look inside, until you hear what the silence of your soul has been trying to tell you for so long. Because there is a part of you that is tired of waiting, of chasing, of begging for attention, of molding yourself to fit into spaces that are too small. There is a part of you that screams, "See me, choose me, love me, even if no one else does." And that scream, that voice, is your soul, your wounded soul, your forgotten soul, your soul, which no longer wants to live on emotional remains. So, if at any point in this video you felt like I was speaking directly to you, maybe it's because I am. Perhaps, without knowing it, you have been waiting for this conversation for a long time. So tell me, which part of these words spoke to your soul? Write in the comments. What you call love was just fear in disguise. This sentence is the beginning of your awakening, and she can touch other souls too. Do you feel like you need someone too much? That without that person, you're lost? As if your identity were tied to that other being. As if without them, your existence lost its meaning, your presence emptied, your world collapsed. This isn't lightness. This isn't love. It's prison. It's emotional survival disguised as romance. It's the soul trying to sustain itself on ground that isn't its own, in a body that doesn't belong to it, in promises that only exist to numb the pain of an incomplete existence. Why does love feel like a prison when it should be freedom? Because most people don't love with their hearts, they love with trauma. They love with scars. They love with fear. And fear, when it drives love, turns the other person into a crutch, not a mirror. It turns the relationship into a battlefield, not a sanctuary. You enter a relationship expecting peace, but you end up reliving all the ghosts you tried to forget. And worse, you start to think this is normal, that true love really hurts, that it has to be difficult, that the other person has to prove to you every day that they love you because, deep down, you yourself don't believe you're worthy of that love. Have you ever noticed how this neediness creeps in silently? At first it seems like just a desire to be together. Then it becomes a need. Then it becomes desperation. And before you know it, you no longer know where the other person ends and you begin. You can't make decisions without their validation. You can't sleep peacefully if they don't respond. You can't feel enough if they don't look at you with the same light. That's not connection. That's emotional dependence. And dependence always exacts a high price. Your freedom, your self-esteem, your peace. The truth is that the emptiness you feel, that hole in your chest that seems to grow when the person moves away, wasn't created by them. It was there long before. This emptiness is old. It's the result of years of ignoring yourself, rejecting yourself, molding yourself to be accepted. It's the echo of promises you made to yourself and never kept. It's the reflection of your absence in your own life. And as long as you continue to believe that someone will come along and fill that space, you'll continue to live and function of someone else's presence or absence. Do you realize how cruel this is to yourself? Handing the key to your emotional balance into the hands of someone who could, at any moment, walk away. And when they do, you crumble. Because along with that person goes the image of who you believed yourself to be. Gone is the feeling of completeness that only existed in the presence of another. Gone is the illusion that you were finally worthy of being loved. But all of this was a reflection, not the truth. It was a mirror of what you wanted to feel, not the reality of who you are. Rumi said, "You are born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life?" Perhaps because crawling still seems safer than flying alone. Perhaps because being tied to someone still seems less painful than facing your own silence. Perhaps because you've become so accustomed to the role of the one in need that you've forgotten how to live whole. But as long as you believe you need saving, you'll continue to drown in any sea of affection. You'll continue to mistake crumbs for banquets. You'll continue to accept less, for fear of being left with nothing. This is the root of the invisible problem. You don't love the other person. You love the temporary relief they bring to your own pain, a pain that demands acceptance, not distraction, a pain that needs to be heard, not avoided. But the ego hates silence. It prefers to fill it with anything, any presence, any touch, any word, any "I love you" that comes from outside. Because looking inside is scary. Because when you close your eyes and dive into this void, you begin to encounter painful memories, parts of yourself you've buried, stories that have never healed. And so to avoid feeling, you cling. You cling with all your might to someone who seems to fulfill what you yourself don't have the courage to face. You call it destiny, a soulmate, passion, but it's just an escape, a subtle, delicate, but deeply destructive escape. Because sooner or later everything built on fear crumbles, and then you find yourself on the ground, once again, wondering why it hurts so much, why it never works out, why no one stays. But is it the other person who never stays? Or is it you who always abandons yourself first? This question can change everything. It can turn the key. Because as long as you keep searching outside for what's broken inside, the cycle will continue. Same love, new pain. Same emptiness, new face. And it's tiring. It tires the soul. It tires the heart. It tires the body. There comes a time when you don't even believe you deserve to be loved anymore. Because all along you've been trying to be accepted by someone, without ever truly accepting yourself. Now tell me, do you feel like you're in love, or are you just trying to survive through someone? Comment here with the phrase, "I choose to free myself from the prison of attachment." This choice could be the first step back home. To yourself. You're not loving. You're clinging to what soothes your selflessness. And this can hurt more than any ending, because it requires acknowledging that everything you called love may have been just an unconscious attempt to escape, an escape from your silence, from your loneliness, from the inner mirror you avoided facing for years. The truth is that many of the feelings we call love are just sophisticated disguises for neediness. Emotional attachment, emotional dependence, fear of abandonment, all of this disguised by pretty words and promises that the soul knew from the beginning would not be fulfilled. And that's why you keep getting hurt, because you're trying to experience love with a closed heart. You're seeking true connection with a wounded soul, with an unresolved history, with unhealed traumas. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking your heart until it opens, not so it can destroy itself, but so it can reveal itself." so it can free itself from the emotional armor you've built to survive. Because true love doesn't flourish where there's defense. Love requires vulnerability, presence, wholeness. But how can you love when you've been taught to protect yourself all the time? How can you give your heart if it only knows the language of fear? How can you trust if every time you try, you're betrayed, ignored, or replaced? The problem is that you've learned to use love as a shield, as a medicine, as a savior. You've expected the other person to be a cure when, in reality, the other person has always been just a reflection. A reflection of your absence, a reflection of your desire to be seen, a reflection of your need to prove you're worthy of love. But no one can truly love when they're empty inside. No one can build something profound when all they feel is the urgency to be complete. And that's where attachment sets in. When love isn't born from abundance but from absence, you connect with someone not because you're overflowing, but because you feel that without them, you're nothing. And this kind of love imprisons you, because any misstep from the other person destabilizes you. Any silence turns into rejection. Any distance turns into abandonment. This is the spiritual diagnosis that many avoid seeing. You're trying to fill a sacred space with temporary presences. You're trying to heal a wound in your soul with kisses, messages, and promises. You're asking someone to hold a pain that you don't even know where it comes from. But no one, absolutely no one, is capable of bearing the weight of your absence. Because this absence hurts. It corrodes. It begs for attention, but it's an attention that only you can give. And until you listen to this pain, it will continue to scream through your relationships. It will continue to manifest as jealousy, as control, as anxiety, as this urge to have someone close at all times. Not because you want to share your light, but because you're trying to erase the darkness you feel inside. And this is the deepest point. Most people love with their shadow. They love with the fear of loss. They love with the urgency of being accepted. They love with the gaping wound, hoping the other person won't see it, or worse, will accept it as it is. But love isn't that. Love is a sacred space where two souls meet without the need to complete each other. They recognize each other, respect each other, support each other, but they don't cling to each other as if their lives depended on it. That's not love. That's attachment. That's emotional survival. And the soul knows it. Even when you try to convince yourself it's love, something inside you senses the imbalance. You feel it in your body, in your insomnia, in your restlessness, in the emotional dependence that grows with each absence of the other. This spiritual imbalance occurs because you've disconnected from your own essence, because you've forgotten who you were before loving someone, because you've stopped looking within and have become dependent on the reflection others offer you. But others can't reflect your light if you yourself aren't lit up inside. It's like trying to see the sunset in a broken mirror, always distorted, always incomplete. And so you live between extremes. Either you cling desperately or you run away before you can cling. And neither of these options is healthy. Both are defense strategies of a soul that hasn't yet learned to rest within itself, of a soul that hasn't yet learned to love without needing, to love without abandoning itself. Rumi wasn't just talking about romantic love. He was talking about a love that begins within, a love that's only possible when you reconcile with who you are, when you stop running from the parts of yourself that still hurt, when you sit in the midst of your inner chaos and decide to stay. No distractions, no shortcuts, no rush. This is the love that heals, the love you offer yourself when you decide to never abandon yourself again. And only after that, only after choosing yourself, can true love, the kind that liberates, expands, and embraces, flourish. Now answer me, with all the truth you have in you. Are you in love? Or just trying not to feel alone? Comment here with the phrase, "I reconnect with my essence before loving." This sentence is the beginning of a new path, a path back home, to you, to what is real. Where there is emptiness, there will be attachment, never love. This is one of those uncomfortable truths the soul feels before the mind even understands. One of those phrases that aren't just words, they're mirrors. They're like an ancient whisper from your essence saying, "You're trying to love, but you're hiding behind attachment." You're calling love what, deep down, is just a temporary relief for the hole you carry inside. And you feel it, even if you can't explain it. You feel it when the other person's silence makes you despair, when the lack of response paralyzes you, when the slightest change in tone, in look, in presence, tears you apart inside. You try to maintain control, try not to appear needy, try to appear strong, but deep down your soul is in pieces because you've placed everything in that other person. Your security, your peace, your certainty of worth, and now you live in constant fear that they'll take it all away. Attachment is born of lack, always of lack, from that childhood wound that still throbs, from that memory of abandonment you never healed, from that fear of being forgotten that you learned to disguise with pretty words, with exaggerated surrender, with this urgency to be indispensable. You learned that, to be loved, you needed to be necessary, and so you confuse love with function. You don't just want to be loved, you want to be vital. You want the other person to need you as you feel you need them. But true love is never born of need. It's born of abundance, of overflowing, of self-presence. It's when you already feel whole and choose to share, not fill. It's when your loneliness no longer terrifies you, when your silence becomes a safe place, when you can be with someone without losing yourself. Love isn't when someone completes you, it's when someone mirrors you, expands you, but you remain yourself, whole, stable, aware. And if you're still in relationships where the other person defines your mood, your value, your self-esteem, that's not love. That's emotional codependency. It's an invisible system that feeds on your absence. And the cruelest thing about all of this is that the more you cling, the more you feel you love, because you confuse intensity with depth. But attachment isn't deep. It's shallow, impulsive, anxious. It drags you down not because it's deep, but because it pulls you into the abyss of yourself. And here's the truth many avoid. Attachment isn't born when you love too much. It's born when you love yourself too little. When you place the other person at the center of your existence because you're afraid to face your own empty center. And this emptiness isn't a punishment. It's not a mistake. It's an invitation, a call, an opportunity to return to yourself. But instead of listening to it, you try to fill it with presences, with messages, with hastily said I love yous, with hugs that last less than they should. But the emptiness remains, because it doesn't want to be filled. It wants to be looked at. It wants to be understood. It wants you to recognize it as part of your journey, not as an enemy to be fought. And at that point, most people lose their way, because we've been taught to run from what hurts, to hide our fragility, to feign strength when our hearts are in ruins. But Rumi wasn't talking about hiding pain. He was talking about moving through it, about allowing it to break you until you finally become real. And when you become real, something changes, deeply. You begin to realize that what you called love was ritualized need. It was a search for acceptance that you never gave yourself. It was an attempt at emotional survival in a body that was already exhausted from trying. Because attachment is exhausting. It takes its toll. It demands constant attention, daily validation, absolute presence. Love doesn't. Love is free. It breathes. It flows. It knows it doesn't need to be tied down to endure. And you deserve that kind of love. But first you need to recognize it within yourself. You need to cultivate that inner abundance that frees you from the need to have someone to feel sufficient. You need to become your own home before inviting someone to live inside. You need to heal your urgency before seeking connection, because if you don't, you'll keep repeating the cycle. Attachment, fear, control, pain. You'll continue to confuse passion with possessiveness, longing with dependence, connection with imprisonment. And you know what's saddest about this? It's that little by little you stop believing in love. You start to think that loving really hurts, that it's normal to suffer, that it's like this for everyone. But it's not. What hurts isn't love. It's attachment. What suffocates isn't the feeling. It's expectation. What corrodes isn't the other. It's the absence of self. And until you turn inward, you'll continue searching outside for what you've always been waiting for in the silence of your own heart. So breathe, feel, look within, and ask yourself sincerely, what have you called love? Has it healed you or hurt you more? Right here in the comments. I choose to love myself until I overflow. This is the phrase that can mark the beginning of a new story. A story where love doesn't hurt, where the soul rests, where presence is light, and attachment has no more place. What no one told you is that true love begins when you stop looking for someone to save you. Because there is no savior. There is no one who comes with ready-made answers, who erases your scars, who frees you from what only you can face. There is you, your story, and the parts of your soul you haven't yet had the courage to listen to. The key to love isn't finding someone perfect, but becoming whole. Being a complete presence within yourself, before wanting to be a part of someone else's life. Healing begins the moment you stop running, chasing attention, chasing proof of love, chasing those who don't even know their own path. Because every time you run outside, you're running from within, running from what you feel, what hurts, what pulses deep down that you've learned to ignore. But what you ignore dominates you silently. What you don't heal repeats itself in every relationship, and what you insist on giving to others, without first experiencing it within yourself, always returns as absence. The truth is, most people don't love. They beg to be loved. They present themselves as a salvation project for the other, in the unconscious hope that if they are essential enough, they won't be abandoned. But this never works, because loving out of fear of being abandoned is a kind of prison you build with your own hands, and over time it suffocates you, not because the other person is bad, but because you've given up your peace in exchange for companionship. You don't need someone to save you. You need the courage to look within, to sit with your pain without judging it, to talk to your loneliness as if rediscovering a forgotten part of yourself. This is the hidden key that no one teaches. Love doesn't begin with the other. It begins in silence. It begins when you stop searching and begin to be. When you listen to yourself. When you understand that you don't need to be anything other than what you already are to be worthy of love. Because true love never requires you to hide. It celebrates your truth, your light, your shadow, your wholeness. But how can you be whole after a life spent fragmenting to be accepted? How can you trust yourself when you've spent years molding yourself to fit in the eyes of others? This is why so many still get lost. Because they confuse love with approval. And they live trying to be likable, perfect, desirable, everything but authentic. But the soul can't bear living in a lie. And eventually it breaks. Eventually, it screams. Eventually, it demands truth. And that's when healing begins. Healing lies in becoming whole, before trying to love someone else. And that's not selfishness. It's emotional responsibility. It's knowing that no one is responsible for your happiness. It's stopping placing on the other person the burden of healing what you yourself have abandoned. When you become whole, you no longer need the other person's presence to feel complete. Presence becomes a choice, not a necessity. And then yes, free love is born. The love that embraces, not binds. The love that adds, not consumes. But being whole isn't about always being okay. It's not about having everything figured out. It's about being willing to stop running away. It's about choosing to stay with your truths, your pain, your story. It's about stopping asking others for what you deny yourself. It's about embracing yourself when you're sad. It's about validating yourself when you're insecure. It's about loving yourself when no one is looking. This is the true spirituality of love, reconnecting with your own soul. Rumi said, "You are born with potential. You are born with kindness and confidence. You are born with ideals and dreams. You are born with greatness." But you forgot that. You forgot who you were before being rejected. You forgot who you were before trying to please everyone. You forgot your essence because you learned that being you wasn't enough. But the soul never forgets. It just waits for you to return, for you to silence the outside noise and listen to the voice that has been whispering for years. Come home. Come back to you. When you return, something subtle changes. You begin to treat yourself more gently. You begin to say no without guilt. You begin to stop comparing yourself. You begin to understand that true love doesn't require performance. And then, little by little, the emptiness begins to disappear. Because the emptiness wasn't the absence of love. It was the absence of you. It was the longing for yourself, stifled by a lifetime of trying to be half as good to please someone else. You deserve to experience something profound. You deserve a connection that doesn't come from fear but from truth. You deserve a love that isn't a rescue, but a mirror. But before that, you need to decide. Will you continue searching for saviors, or will you finally become whole? This choice changes everything. It defines the kind of love you attract, the kind of story you write, the kind of soul you allow yourself to encounter. Now tell me, are you ready to stop running away from yourself? Right here in the comments. I come back to myself before I love someone. This sentence isn't just a statement, it's a call, a reminder, a step toward your healing. And who knows, by writing this, you're doing more than just participating in a video. Maybe you're beginning to find yourself again. Perhaps you are right now in a relationship where you love more than you are loved, and you know it, not because someone told you, but because you feel it in your body. You feel it in the waiting, in the doubt, in the tightness in your chest when the other person falls silent. You feel it in the look that doesn't return in kind, in the presence that arrives half-heartedly, in the touch that no longer soothes. You feel it, even when you try to deny it. Even when you insist on justifying, understanding, adapting. You feel it, because your soul feels it before you accept it, and yet you remain. Why? Because deep down, you're not just waiting to be loved. You're waiting to be validated. You're waiting for someone to see at some point everything you've given, everything you've endured, everything you've kept quiet for love. You don't just want love. You want to be seen. You want someone to finally say, I see you. I understand your pain. I choose you just the way you are. But that recognition hasn't come yet, and perhaps it never will, because it's not him who hurts you. It's your hope that he'll fill what only you can heal. It's the projection you've built, the idealized image of a love that doesn't exist, the fantasy that if you try harder, love yourself more, give more, everything will change. But what you still don't understand is that no matter how much you give, no one can fill a void they don't understand, a hole that has no shape, because it was created by an abandonment that happened long before this relationship began. You're asking someone to heal a pain you've carried since before you knew what love was. A pain that perhaps began in childhood, when you felt invisible, when you felt you had to do everything right to avoid being left behind, when you realized that love could be conditional. And now, without realizing it, you repeat it silently. You love too much, you accept too much, you deny yourself too much, all to avoid reliving that same pain of being left behind. But it's precisely this fear that keeps you trapped. It's the fear that won't let you leave even when everything inside you screams that it's past time. Even when there's no longer any reciprocity. Even when the other person doesn't choose you the way you choose them. You continue. Because you think that if you let go, you'll lose everything. You'll lose yourself. As if this relationship were the only thread keeping you connected to what you call love. But that's not love. That's emotional attachment. And it silently eats away at you. You wonder why you're so tired, why even when you're with someone you feel lonely, why you live in a constant state of expectation, anxiety, and need. And I tell you, it's because you're trying to sustain something that should be light on your own. You're carrying the weight of two presences on your shoulders, yours and the other person's. You love for both, care for both, give yourself to both. But a relationship isn't a unilateral sacrifice. It's not an altar where only one kneels. And here's the wound that hurts to admit. You learned to call love what was always effort. You learned that to be loved, you had to prove it. That love was deserved, earned, worked for, never simply received, never natural. And so now when someone doesn't reciprocate, you don't question the other person. You question yourself. You think you're wrong, that you're not enough, that you need to do more. And it's in this cycle of self-denial that your soul fades. A little each day. Perhaps you're reliving the same pattern in multiple relationships. Maybe the story changes names, faces, addresses, but the emotional plot is always the same. You give yourself first. You wait. You get hurt. And you keep going. Because you love? Maybe. But also because you believe you have no other choice. Because you think this is the best you can have. Because you've convinced yourself that love always comes with pain. But it doesn't come. True love doesn't exhaust you. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't diminish you. True love doesn't require you to extinguish yourself to keep the other person close. On the contrary, it ignites, it expands, it strengthens, it heals, and you feel it in your soul. You feel lightness. You feel peace. You feel that you can be yourself, completely, without fear of being too much or too little. But to experience this love, you must first escape the cycle of emotional survival. You need to stop begging for what should be natural. You need to stop expecting emotional crumbs as if they were banquets. You need to understand that the other person isn't the villain in your story. They're simply responding to your inner vibration. And as long as you're vibrating neediness, scarcity, and fear of being alone, you'll continue to attract people who confirm this in you. But when you begin to vibrate wholeness, when you choose yourself with truth, with firmness, with presence, something changes. You stop accepting little. You stop negotiating your peace. You stop justifying the unjustifiable. And more than that, you begin to attract relationships that resonate with your new frequency. Because the universe doesn't deliver what you desire with words. It responds to what you silently accept. It reflects what you allow. And now, perhaps, is the time to change that. To stop. To listen to yourself. To say to yourself with all the strength of your soul, enough, I choose me. And if you felt, at any point, that this text spoke to your story, your relationship, your silence, then perhaps it's time to speak to your soul too. Right here in the comments, I free myself from what does not choose me. This phrase may seem simple, but it has the power to begin a new chapter. Because sometimes, all the soul needs is for you to choose to return to it. You no longer need to beg for love. You need to remember who you are. And perhaps this is the hardest memory to access when the soul is tired, when the body has grown accustomed to absence, when the heart has become a dwelling place of doubt. But even so, within you, there is still something that has never been extinguished. An invisible thread, a spark, a silent memory of your true essence. And this memory doesn't scream, doesn't demand, doesn't beg. It just waits. It waits for the day when you finally stop crawling through life seeking to be chosen, and rise with the courage of someone who decides to choose themselves. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you prefer to crawl through life? Maybe because they taught you it was safer that way. Because they said true love requires sacrifice. That it's normal to love and be hurt at the same time. That it's beautiful to sacrifice yourself for the one you love. But that's not love. That's ancestral conditioning. It's a learned, repeated cycle, sustained by centuries of unhealed emotional pain, and the time has come to break it, to stop wearing clothes that no longer fit, to stop fitting into spaces that diminish your soul. You were shaped to beg for scraps, but your soul was born to overflow. You were taught to be discreet with your feelings, to not disturb with your sensitivity, to not appear too needy, too intense, too deep. But this too much is precisely where your strength lies. It is in deep feeling, in true surrender, in the search for the soul and not for appearances, that you find what few have the courage to seek. Love that cannot be bought, persuaded, or begged for. Love that simply is. That recognizes, that sustains, that expands. And to access this, you don't need someone else. You need more of yourself. You need to remember what lives within you. You need to recognize that it wasn't the other person's lack of love that broke you. It was how much you forgot to love yourself in the process. The wound isn't about them leaving. It's about you staying, even though you felt like you were being abandoned every day. It's about accepting less than you deserved because deep down, you believed that was the best you could have. But today you can choose differently, not because the other person has changed, but because you are changing. Because there is a point in the journey where pain stops being just pain and begins to be revelation. A place where suffering becomes a bridge. A path where the soul begins to whisper more clearly. It wasn't you who was rejected. It was your light that wasn't recognized. It wasn't a lack of love. It was a lack of courage on the part of those who couldn't find you. And you no longer need to shrink to fit into arms too fragile to hold you. You no longer need to silence yourself to maintain a presence that only remains if you deny who you are. The time has come to remember that you are whole, even hurt, even confused, even still in process, because wholeness is not the absence of wounds. It is presence despite them. It is the courage to show yourself as you are, to hold your own gaze, to be a mirror of your own light. This is spiritual empowerment. It's when you begin to feel that you didn't come here to beg for love, but to become your own temple, to be home, to be healing, to be light for yourself, even in the darkest nights. Because true awakening doesn't happen when the other person returns. It happens when you stop waiting for them to return, when you understand that you no longer need external proof to recognize your worth, that you no longer need the other person to stay to feel worthy of being loved. And this shift in consciousness is silent. It doesn't scream. It simply transforms. Little by little, you begin to say no more firmly. You begin to move away from places where your presence is ignored. You begin to choose what resonates, what nourishes, what expands. You begin to step out of automatic mode, out of fear, out of scarcity, and you begin to breathe the truth of your soul. You find yourself again. You reconnect. You free yourself. Not because it no longer hurts, but because even with the pain, you no longer abandon yourself. This is true freedom. Being with someone by choice, not out of need. It's loving without hiding. It's being vulnerable without losing your footing. It's opening up without losing yourself. And above all, it's knowing that if the other person leaves, you won't fall apart. Because those who have a home within themselves don't fear absence. Those who know their own worth don't sell themselves short. Those who have seen themselves whole no longer accept being half anywhere. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you has already begun this movement. Maybe still afraid, maybe still with doubts, but it has begun. And that's all there is to it. Because it's not about being ready. It's about being awake, being willing to remember, remembering who you were before the pain, before the abandonment, before the adaptation, remembering what your soul already knew, that you no longer need to beg for love, you just need to return to yourself. If this spoke to your soul on some deep level, comment here with the phrase, "I am home before I am shelter for anyone." This sentence isn't just a comment, it's a statement, a milestone, a step toward your truth. And your truth is sacred. Close your eyes for a moment. Breathe. Now imagine a scene you've perhaps never allowed yourself to experience. You're standing in front of a mirror. It's no ordinary mirror. It doesn't just reflect the image of your body, your face, your visible marks. This mirror reflects your soul. It reveals everything you've hidden, even from yourself. It doesn't reveal what you reveal to the world. It reveals what you've forgotten. It reveals what you've left behind. It reveals what you tried to silence when you decided to love others more than yourself. You stand there still, silent. And for the first time, you're not trying to appear strong. You're not trying to appear sufficient. You're not trying to convince anyone that you deserve love. You're simply looking. And in the reflection, you begin to see the parts of yourself that you've judged for so long. The fragile, sensitive, anxious parts. The child who once wanted to be held and never received it. The teenager who molded himself to be accepted. The adult who learned to call desperation love. But instead of rejecting yourself once more, you breathe. Allow the emotion to come. Allow the tears to fall if they need to. Allow your chest to tighten if it needs to. Because this time you're willing to see truthfully, to feel deeply, to acknowledge yourself honestly. And in that silent moment where everything could be chaos, there's a kind of peace, a strange, new, disconcerting peace, because it doesn't come from the absence of pain, it comes from the presence of you. And it's at that point that something changes, that time seems to stop, that the soul leans inward and whispers, "I've always been here." And you understand. You understand that it was never about the other. It was never about who left, who stayed, who didn't choose you. It was always about you forgetting your own presence, having abandoned yourself every time you chose someone for fear of being alone, having kept quiet every time you wanted to scream, having diminished yourself every time you wanted to be whole. Now in this mirror of the soul, you see yourself, with the pain, with the flaws, with the broken history, but also with the light that survived, with the strength no one saw, with the beauty that remained intact even after so much shaping. And something inside you decides, for the first time, I choose myself. You don't choose yourself because you feel ready now. You choose yourself because you're tired of waiting. You're tired of waiting for someone to see you so you feel worthy of being seen. You're tired of waiting for someone to value you so you feel valuable. You're tired of begging for recognition, presence, love. You choose yourself because you understand that your soul has waited too long. It has waited in empty beds. It has waited in unanswered messages. It has waited in eyes that didn't see you. And now, it doesn't want to wait anymore. It wants to live. And life begins like this, with a silent choice. A choice no one sees, but one that transforms everything. A choice that needs no applause, that requires no proof, that doesn't depend on validation. It just happens. And you feel it. You feel it in your body. You feel it in your breathing that slows down. You feel it in your chest that for the first time it no longer carries the weight of abandonment. Because where there is self-presence, emptiness no longer reigns. The mirror is still there. And you realize that no matter how much the image changes, what matters isn't the reflection, it's the way you look at yourself. And now that look is sweeter, more compassionate, more whole. You look at yourself with the kind of love you've waited so long to receive. And you realize that this love was always within your reach. You just had to stop running. You just had to come back. And it is in that moment, in that small miracle of reconnection, that you rebuild yourself. Not from who the other wanted you to be, but from who you are, from your silence, from your truth, from your broken yet still burning light. Because even when everything went dark, you were still home. You were still a temple. You were still a soul searching for itself. Now tell me, can you imagine yourself in this scene, looking yourself in the eyes and saying firmly and sweetly, "I choose myself"? If this touched something inside you, write it here in the comments. Today I look at myself with love, and I remain. This sentence may seem small, but it's the beginning of a return, a step toward your soul, and your soul has always known the way back. Love is not a cure for emptiness. Love is what emerges when you heal from it. And this is one of the biggest mistakes most of us learn too soon, believing that love will save us, that it will heal all our wounds, give meaning to our story, bring peace to what is at war within us. But true love is not born of desperation, urgency, or absence. It blossoms where there is presence, where there is stillness, where there is reconciliation with one's own soul. That's why it takes time. Not because it's difficult, but because it's us who take too long to stop running. Most people aren't looking for love. They're looking for relief. Relief from loneliness, from insecurity, from self-doubt. And in this search for anesthesia, we give ourselves up too quickly. We offer ourselves for too little. We accept crumbs as if they were a banquet. We throw ourselves headfirst into promises that never came to fruition. And when everything falls apart, we say, "It's love that hurts." But love doesn't hurt. What hurts is the expectation that the other person carries what only we should hold within. What hurts is the absence of self, trying to heal in the presence of the other. You need to stop giving into attachment and start giving into your own light. Because deep down, everything you seek is already there. Inside, silently, waiting for the day you stop abandoning yourself to please. Waiting for the day you understand that loving someone doesn't mean forgetting you. That connection doesn't require loss of identity. That surrender isn't submission. That consuming love isn't love. It's poorly disguised fear. You've been giving too much of yourself, perhaps. You've been forgetting too much. You've always been putting others first. You've been prioritizing those who put you second, third, last. And that drains you. It dries your soul. It makes you doubt your light, your beauty, your dignity. But I ask you, when did you decide you didn't deserve more? When did you start thinking you had to beg to be seen, to be chosen, to be loved? Who convinced you that you needed to make an effort to be accepted? Because the truth is, true love doesn't require effort to exist. It demands presence, wholeness, truth. It doesn't ask you to be less. It wants you to be more of yourself. And if you've been in relationships where you need to diminish yourself, be silent, hide. Perhaps you're giving in to attachment, not love. Attachment fears loss. Love trusts. Attachment controls. Love allows. Attachment clings. Love embraces. And when you begin to surrender to your light, instead of submitting to neediness, the world around you begins to change. Your choices change. What you accept changes. What once felt like love now feels like noise. What once felt like necessity now feels like escape. What once felt like companionship now feels like distraction. Because your soul, finally, is beginning to be heard. And it never asked you to chase anyone. It never asked you to nullify yourself. It never asked you to prove yourself. All your soul ever wanted was for you to come home, to it, to yourself. And this path is not easy. It requires courage. It requires crossing the void. It requires staying with the discomfort. It requires sitting with the pain instead of running to the first available shoulder. But it is in this silence, in this immersion, in this place where everything seems to fall apart, that the light begins to emerge. Not an external light, Not a promise that someone will come to save you, but an internal light. Yours, the one you forgot existed, the one no one can take away, the one that, once accessed, changes everything. Because those who connect with their own light no longer need to live in the shadow of others, no longer need to beg for crumbs, no longer need to settle for empty presences, because they understand that presence for presence's sake, their own is enough, that before any other love there is love for themselves. And this love is not arrogance, it is not selfishness, it is not isolation, it is foundation, it is root, it is source, it is where all that is true is born. You begin to respect yourself, to say no more firmly, to leave places that no longer make sense, to stop investing energy in those who don't nourish you, because you understand that being alone isn't the worst scenario. The worst is being in bad company with someone, or with yourself. And you don't have to live that anymore. You don't have to repeat this cycle anymore. You don't have to punish yourself with stories that only confirm how much you've forgotten your own light. You deserve more. You deserve peace. You deserve lightness. You deserve a love that doesn't doubt. You deserve to look at someone and know they're there by choice, not out of fear of being alone. You deserve to wake up one day and feel, I am with myself. And that moment comes when you stop running, when you stop projecting, when you finally decide to surrender, not to others, not to what's external, but to yourself, to your healing, to your light. And if, at any point in this video, your soul recognized itself in these words, then right now, in this moment, even if there's still doubt, even if there's still pain, make a silent commitment to yourself, right here in the comments. I am my own light before seeking any love. This sentence isn't just a comment, it's a rescue, a step, an act of remembrance, because the soul that is enlightened never crawls for crumbs again. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is awakening. And know this is no coincidence. Your soul is asking for more truth, more depth, more connection with what truly matters. So, before you leave, do 3 very simple but powerful things. First, subscribe to the channel. This isn't just clicking a button, it's saying yes to a journey of healing, of awareness, of reconnecting with who you are. Here, each video is a portal, and Rumi walks with us in every word and every silence. Second, leave your like. If this message touched your story in any way, this simple gesture helps other souls who, like you, are searching for meaning in the midst of emptiness. Now, the next step is right in front of you. The next video is on the screen. Click and stay with me. Your soul knows the journey is just beginning.